In this video, I shall be following the same revised format that I employed in Chaos and Durach vs. Sora Bulk, laying out each section in order of relevance, and with the martial arts breakdown coming last, and the conclusion for that section being worked into the verdict. The reasoning behind this is that, as with my previous video, both combatants involved are dedicated martial artists and swordsmen, with the final result of the fight being dictated by their skill in that area, all other factors being secondary. So, to streamline things, I'm simply making the most relevant conclusion the conclusion. I would do the same thing if I were comparing two dedicated force wielders such as Volfe Karkko and Joruus Sabaoth. Evan, get on that. Simply making the force ability conclusion into the verdict. Both combatants involved are dedicated martial artists and swordsmen, with the final result of the fight being dictated by their skill in that area, all other factors being secondary.
After the fall of Lord Khan's Brotherhood of Darkness, the Jedi Order would enjoy an era of relative peace, their adversaries being limited to the likes of criminals and thugs, rather than the savage Dark Lords that previously plagued the galaxy. It was into this era that the legend of the famous Jedi turned Dark Jedi, Volfe Karkko, was forged. Born over a millennium before the Naboo crisis, Volfe Karkko rose to prominence as one of the most powerful Jedi of his era. Noted for being the only Anzadi in galactic history to demonstrate any Force sensitivity, something he never got tired of reminding his fellow Jedi, as they believed he would be unable to resist his species' instinctive need to feed off the life force of other sentient beings. Scoffing at the Jedi Council's warnings, Volfe proceeded to use his Jedi powers to feed off his fellow Jedi, his reasoning being that his training would allow him to resist such temptations. However, upon his first taste, Volfe immediately became addicted and fell to the dark side, his strength in the Force increasing with every Jedi he fed off of. Realizing the threat Volfe posed, the Jedi Council took it upon themselves to bring him down. Tracking him to the planet Kifex, the Council defeated Volfe and imprisoned him in a stasis chamber, hoping his defeat would serve as an example to the rest of the Jedi Order. Volfe Karkko was freed in 30 BBY, when the amnesia-ridden Jedi Padawan Aayla Secura crashed on Kifex to escape her master, Quinlan Vos, whom she mistakenly blamed for the death of her uncle. Taking Secura as his dark apprentice, Volfe used her to gather more life force until he was strong enough to leave Kifex and take his revenge on the Jedi. The two were eventually confronted by Quinlan Vos, who had tracked his apprentice to Kifex with the aid of his former master, Thulm. While Quinlan was able to break Volfe's hold on Aayla's mind, the Dark Jedi quickly incapacitated her and forced Vos to meet him head-to-head. While Volfe initially dominated Vos, the combined battle meditation enhancement of Jedi Masters Thulm, Thrasa, and Zhao gave him the strength to overcome Karkko. Cloned from the DNA of the powerful Jedi Master Joruus Sabaoth with the aid of Carterio technology, Joruus C'baoth was placed as a guardian by Palpatine on the planet Wayland in order to guard a vast treasure trove of Imperial artifacts. Slowly driven insane due to the imperfect cloning process, C'baoth fell to the dark side and instigated Authorian rule over the local Wayland villages, believing that force powers made him, and all others like him, inherently superior to all other beings in the galaxy. C'baoth's freedom would come in 9 ABY, when Grand Admiral Thrawn, the leader of the Empire Reborn movement, sought to recruit the Dark Jedi in order to use his battle meditation to aid his navy. While initially skeptical about the Admiral's ambitions, C'baoth accepted his offer when the Chiss revealed the existence of Luke and Leia Skywalker. After aiding Thrawn in reclaiming much of the Empire's old territories, Joruus C'baoth attempted to corrupt Luke Skywalker to his way of thinking, though Skywalker saw C'baoth's view of the Force as a perversion of everything his masters had taught him. Enraged at Skywalker's defiance, C'baoth proceeded to make his own Luke Skywalker, cloning him from the hand Skywalker had lost at Bespin, and dubbing him Luuke Skywalker, training him in the Jedi arts, and granting him the same lightsaber Luke had lost, along with his hand. C'baoth and Luuke were eventually confronted by Luke Skywalker in the former Emperor's hand, Mara Jade. After an unsuccessful attempt to reason with the deranged Dark Jedi, Skywalker was forced to confront his clone, and a brutal lightsaber duel ensued. Taking advantage of the clone's distraction, Mara Jade seized Leia Organa Solo's lightsaber and impaled Luuke. Joruus C'baoth's death soon followed, as his blind rage and exhaustion allowed Mara to land a killing blow, his body evaporating in a blinding explosion of light. Hey guys, Evanova95 here. Welcome to another installment of the Versus series, Season 4. Now, if you guys couldn't tell by that admittedly weak opening before the character intros, this battle's gonna be a little different. A few months back, Jen Sarai suggested I do Volfe Karkko versus Joruus C'baoth. I thought the idea was novel, so I decided to go with it. But in drafting the notes for this battle, I ran into a bit of a snag. As combatants, Volfe Karkko and Joruus C'baoth are primarily Force wielders, with the specifics of their lightsaber training being all but non-existent, really. While I did draft a set of statistics for Karkko in my first video with him, I made it quite clear that lightsaber dueling was not his area of strength, and he only employed his weapon as a means of defense when unable to use his Force abilities at a moment's notice. C'baoth's dueling skills are even more scarce, as he has never been depicted in a lightsaber duel with an opposing Force wielder, nor is he implied to even wield a lightsaber in any of his appearances. In fact, only one stock image exists that points to the fact that he even carried a lightsaber, let alone used it. I also can't make any connections to his genetic template, as his martial arts training is identically vague. At the end of the day, a lightsaber duel between these two would be basically a non-entity, which means even attempting to analyze how their skills with martial arts stack up against each other is honestly pretty pointless. However, rather than scrapping a large portion of my video, Jen Sarai found a solution to address the problem, as well as turn this matchup into a team battle. Both Volfe Karkko and Joruus C'baoth were insane Dark Jedi who specialized in Force-based combat, and they both employed the aid of Force-wielding Thralls who specialized in lightsaber combat, and functioned as basically little more than an extension of their master's will. For this team battle, I will be pitting Volfe Karkko and Padawan Aayla Secura against Joruus C'baoth and Luuke Skywalker. While the physical attributes will include all team members, the martial arts breakdown will be strictly between Aayla and Luuke. while the Force abilities comparison will be between Volfe and Sabayoth. I will not be taking into account the Thralls' Force abilities, as they both specialized in lightsaber dueling, and they have only demonstrated the most basic of combative Force abilities, which leaves the comparison pointless. I will also not be comparing weaponry, as both Thralls utilize standard lightsabers with no differing characteristics. With that said, I bring you Volfe Karkko and Padawan Aayla Secura versus Joruus Sabayoth and Luuke Skywalker, or as we like to call it, the Battle of the Thralls. Let's begin. First, we will compare their physical attributes. Volfe Karkko was an Anzadi male just over a millennium in age. The Anzadi were a race of humanoids noted for their athleticism and high pain threshold. While longevity and telepathic ability were traits shared by the species, Anzadi were mainly distinguished by two retractable tentacles housed in their cheeks. Once he or she cornered a victim, the Anzadi's tentacles would enter the nasal cavity and work their way to the brain, draining it dry and killing the victim. During this process, the Anzadi would be able to see the memories of the being it was feeding on, literally devouring their life force. Once again, ew. Despite his ridiculously advanced age, Karkko possessed reasonably well-developed speed, strength, and agility, though he wasn't one to dart around the battlefield aimlessly, and typically kept himself pretty grounded. Karkko also suffered from the physical degradation brought on by deep immersion in the dark side of the Force, such as yellow eyes and deathly pale skin, though the degree to which his physical abilities are hampered, if at all, are unknown. At the time of her apprenticeship under Karkko, Aayla Secura was a female Rutan Twi'lek of 16 years of age. An omnivorous race with multiple stomachs, sharp teeth, a broad range of skin pigmentations, and two growths protruding from the back of their head called Leku, Twi'leks were strong, agile, and possessed a high tolerance to physical injury, though they didn't possess the same physical fortitude of other species like Zabraks or Togrudans. The Leku could also cause excruciating pain when grabbed or struck with enough force, though this was rarely seen. Being in the early stages of her physical prime, Aayla possessed all the qualities inherent to her species, though nothing beyond the norm. At the time of his death in 27 BBY, Joruus Sabayoth was a human male in his late 50s. While the exact specifics of when Joruus Sabayoth was created are unknown, he appears to be in the same age group. While he retained a good level of speed and agility, he was past his physical prime, his physical degradation brought on by the natural factors of old age, and likely the unstable cloning genetics. As with Karkko, Sabayoth has suffered some dark side degradation, and displays the yellow eyes and pale skin common to beings who have delved too deeply in the dark side of the Force. However, he still retained a good level of physical ability despite his age, and was able to hold up a high-intensity fight with the much younger and fitter Luuke Skywalker, Leia Solo, and Mara Jade, with only his Force abilities to rely on for a lengthy period of time, only starting to tire towards the end. A human male genetically accelerated to 28 years of age in the span of a month, Luuke Skywalker shared the exact same physical capabilities as his clone template, prosthetic hand notwithstanding, of course, and as such possessed considerable levels of speed and physical hardiness, and notably staved off the adverse effects commonly attributed to growth acceleration. This one's pretty simple to decide. Joruus Sabayoth is well built for his age, but Volfe Karkko is tougher and possesses a far greater range of physical abilities. While Luuke is no pushover, Aayla soundly outperforms him in the physical sense, thanks to her Twi'lek attributes. Volfe Karkko and Padawan Aayla Secura get the physical edge. Now we will compare Aayla Secura's and Luuke Skywalker's skills as martial artists and lightsaber duelists. As a Jedi Knight, Aayla Secura was a reasonably talented lightsaber duelist, having defeated the infamous Jedi Hunter Aurra Sing and surviving an engagement with the CIS commander General Grievous. As a Padawan, her skills were less refined, though she remained a talented swordswoman in her own right. Aayla's chosen martial arts disciplines were Ataru and Chien, the fourth and fifth forms of classical lightsaber combat. Ataru was the most physically demanding of the 7 traditional forms. It emphasized using the entire body as a weapon, incorporating punches, kicks, and other physical strikes into one seemingly wild but disciplined blade work. Developed to address the offensive deficiencies of Form 3, Form 5 was built around the tactic of following up defensive maneuvers with immediate offensive counters. The Chien variant was designed for blast deflection, using aimed deflection to take out enemies or other targets of opportunity. When fighting offensively, Aayla demonstrated very high levels of speed, agility, and acrobatic ability, and executed her sword moves swiftly. Aayla strongly favored chaining in physical strikes into her lightsaber sequences, once again keeping in focus with Ataru's tenets. However, her precision was somewhat lacking, and it seemed clear to me that she was still working towards mastering Ataru's offensive velocities, as demonstrated by her inability to pierce Quinlan Voss's guard, himself a master of the exact same fighting style. While an argument could be made for Quinlan's familiarity with Aayla's technique, Aayla's inferiority to her master was undeniable in that contest, and Voss could have easily killed her if not for his desire to bring her back. Her defense was very much grounded in Chien. She was adept in blast deflection and typically chose to stonewall her adversaries rather than using acrobatic evasions. At the end of the day, Padawan Aayla Secura may not have been a perfect warrior, but her weakness had nothing to do with her chosen technique. Instead, everything to do with her inexperience. She was a reasonably capable fighter who hadn't yet reached her full potential as a duelist. In other words, a fairly typical Jedi apprentice. Despite his gross inexperience, Luuke Skywalker was a highly formidable lightsaber duelist. Having been able to match his genetic template, Luke Skywalker, in a lightsaber duel for a lengthy period of time after only 1 month worth of training. Luuke's primary fighting style has not been confirmed in any source. However, the novel and comic book adaptations of The Last Command paint a pretty clear picture of what he's capable of. At the time of Thrawn's attempted resurgence of the Empire, Luke Skywalker's primary fighting form was Gemso, backed up by Surisu and Ataru. As described in the novel, Luuke's sword moves mimicked those of Luke's own, suggesting that he followed the same fighting style. However, the novel also makes it pretty clear that Luuke fought extremely aggressively and often kept himself rooted in place rather than relying on force-based acrobatics. By my own analysis, the evidence strongly suggests that Luuke Skywalker specialized in Gemso and it alone, rather than incorporating elements of other fighting forms into his technique. As I mentioned previously, Form 5 was built around following up defensive blocks and parries with immediate offensive counters, seizing the initiative rather than passively responding to an opponent's actions. The Gemso branch was designed for use in lightsaber dueling, and greatly emphasized power attacks to swiftly overwhelm the defenses of opponents. When fighting offensively, Luuke Skywalker embodied ferocity, his technique mainly consisting of aggressive thrusts and immediate counters, textbook Gemso offensive. His defense followed the typical Gemso standard, stonewalling his assailant with minimalistic swordplay, though in this regard he was slightly less capable, and he has left himself exposed on multiple occasions. At the end of the day, Luuke Skywalker was a highly effective lightsaber duelist, if a bit predictable in his methods. He may have only participated in one serious lightsaber duel against an opposing Force wielder, but we mustn't forget that that very Force wielder was Luke Skywalker, who, while at the time may not have been in his prime as a swordsman, he was still a highly advanced lightsaber duelist, and Luuke was able to match him blow for a majority of their duel. As lightsaber duelists, Padawan Aayla Secura and Luuke Skywalker both utilized very similar tactical approaches. Both utilized aggressive and emotionally charged fighting styles to off-balance and overwhelm the opposition. Where the differences arose is the level of skill each of them employed with this very method. Both may have engaged two of the up-and-coming premier lightsaber duelists of their respective eras, but only Luuke truly stood a chance at defeating his, something Aayla never had. Luke Skywalker defeated Luuke by radically changing up his fighting style in the midst of their duel, since their initial techniques were so dang similar that it was like fighting one's own reflection. This means that Luuke is inherently weak against any radical or unorthodox strategy outside the perimeters of his limited, though advanced training. But against Aayla's relatively basic blade work, Luuke doesn't really have anything to worry about. And this is before we take into account Luke Skywalker's superiority over Quinlan Vos as a lightsaber duelist in these time frames, which makes Luuke's ability to match him and Aayla's inability to defeat Vos a clear indication of who's the more viable in applying their shared tactical approach. Luuke Skywalker gets the edge as a martial artist and lightsaber duelist. Now we compare Volfe Karkko and Joruus C'baoth's Force abilities. As a dedicated Force wielder who eschewed the development of all other forms of Jedi combat in order to focus primarily on the Force, Volfe Karkko was an exceedingly powerful Dark Jedi, and was fluent in the use of various conventional and unorthodox Force-based abilities. His initial defeat on Kifex only thanks to the combined might of the entire Jedi Council, which just tells you how advanced his powers really were. Physical augmentation to allow for the performance of various superhuman feats were included in his bag of tricks, as the ability was common to all trained Force wielders, though as I mentioned previously, Volfe typically refrained from employing elaborate Force-based acrobatics, typically keeping himself grounded in place. Volfe's combative applications of telekinesis were nothing short of overwhelming, ranging from basic pushes and pulls intended to stagger or disarm, to vicious telekinetic shoves to thrash his opponents about, even striking down opposing Force wielders. He used grip for the precise manipulation of objects, and sometimes even seizing live enemies. Another defining attribute of Karkko's offensive technique was his aptitude with energy-based Force abilities. A self-claimed master of Force lightning, he has used it to loose storms of destructive energy capable of causing both incapacitation and death. Skilled in the use of Tutaminis, he has been depicted absorbing and redirecting Force lightning with his bare hands. Not an unprecedented feat. Telepathy was another field in which Volfe possessed considerable talent. Beyond the basic mind trick to persuade non-Force sensitive individuals and long-distance communication with unwilling subjects, he was adept in enhancing his Anzadi telepathy to the point where he could employ straight-up mind control over other Anzadi, as well as low-level Force wielders who have not been trained to resist such influence. Beyond these more conventional dark side powers, Volfe possessed a strong affinity for Sith sorcery and magics, delving deep into the dark side of the Force to summon archaic energies. His primary offensive applications of these powers were Force-based illusions, conjuring up horrific images to strike out and off-balance a target. Volfe primarily used illusions as a means of distraction, confusing his targets and forcing them to divert their attention, then lashing out at them with either telekinesis or lightning. A very utilitarian strategy. However, it should be noted that Karkko was particularly dependent on these abilities, as their execution required intense concentration in order to be maintained, and in the rare instances the illusions failed him, he struggled to rally from the unexpected setback. Like his genetic template, Joruus C'baoth possessed an extremely powerful, primal connection to the Force. His combative abilities being awe-inspiring in their magnitude and variety. In order to compensate for the physical degradation brought on by old age, physical augmentation obviously played a crucial role in his technique, though, like Volfe, elaborate acrobatics was not something he typically employed. Telekinesis was one of C'baoth's primary skills, and he made heavy combative use of it, employing a wide range of telekinetic attacks. On the more basic level, he has employed force grabs and pulls to disarm opponents, as well as clear away incredibly heavy objects with little to no effort. In combat, he has used powerful force pushes and shoves to thrash enemies, often fatally, and he was especially skilled with force throw, lifting and pelting enemies with loose objects. Again, like Volfe, C'baoth's telekinetic attacks have been consistently shown to penetrate the defenses of opposing force wielders, adding credence to their destructive power. Energy-based attacks were an area C'baoth possessed considerable talent, Force Lightning being one of the most advanced and often used abilities in his arsenal. Beyond the typical uses for torture and murder, C'baoth's lightning could be channeled to strike down multiple targets simultaneously, outright disable other Force users upon contact, and cause destruction on a massive scale. It is also implied he possessed skills with Tutaminis and could absorb lightning with his bare hands. On the topic of defense, he was especially talented in creating Force shields to protect himself from falling debris, though the maximum amount of protection offered by them is unknown. C'baoth can also use Force-based strangulation to choke his enemies out, a skill his genetic template used against Thrawn during their encounter in the unknown regions. In a fit of rage, he has used the Force to amplify the sound of his voice and turn it into a sonic weapon, leveling the Wayland Temple and ripping through Skywalker and Mara's Force defenses with one shout. Joruus C'baoth's telepathic abilities were some of the most advanced in galactic history. He applied the basic mind trick as if it were child's play, and on the more advanced side of things, has used it to completely erase the memories of a desired target. After much research and experimentation, he even learned how to control the minds of strong-willed individuals, remaking them in his own image, a technique that only a few Force wielders in galactic history could lay claim to. C'baoth's most notable telepathic ability was the highly advanced battle meditation, where he strengthens the morale of his allies while demoralizing and confusing the enemies. With this power, he was able to turn the tide of massive scale engagements, something only the master level practitioners of this ability could successfully pull off. On the whole, Joruus C'baoth was an exceedingly powerful and versatile combative Force wielder, his destructive potential utterly immense. As combative Force wielders, Volfe Karkko and Joruus C'baoth employed very similar abilities and tactics. Both are offensive juggernauts who employed a wider range of offensive abilities, as well as utilizing several advanced and unorthodox abilities to off-balance the opposition and control the fight. Their aptitude for Force-based physical augmentation are identical in almost every way, as neither make any significant use of the ability beyond the boosting of their stamina. Both possess high levels of skill with telekinesis, though in this regard I would say C'baoth takes the edge here, as his demonstrated variety and power with telekinesis is marginally greater than anything Karkko has ever achieved or been credited with. The importance of lightning is negligible. as both are capable of effectively utilizing and defending against it. Both are highly skilled in the field of telepathy, being able to overpower the minds of opposing force wielders, though of course Sabaoth has demonstrated a much higher affinity for force-based telepathy than his competition. What ultimately separates Volfe Karkko and Joruus Sabaoth as combative force wielders are the advanced abilities they use to off-balance and further their control of the battlefield. In Karkko's case, his Sith illusions, and for Sabaoth, his battle meditation. As mentioned previously, Volfe mainly used his illusions as a means of distraction, rather than a destructive offensive tool like the illusions used by Darth Zana. Sabaoth used battle meditation to gain the upper hand in a conflict by suppressing the fighting spirit of his adversaries. Drastically different abilities, but very similar in their applications. However, the effectiveness of Volfe's illusions, particularly against a telepathic savant like Sabaoth, are very much in question. As the illusions work by clouding the perceptions of a target, they are doing the very thing that battle meditation is designed to address. In Tales of the Jedi, Nomi Sunrider employed an inwardly directed form of battle meditation to dispel Alima Keto's Sith illusions, a feat I do not consider outside of Sabaoth's capabilities, due to his skill in battle meditation being so advanced. Both may utilize very similar tactics and abilities in single combat, but Joruus Sabaoth's battle meditation is ultimately a more effective trump card than Volfe's Sith illusions, and for this reason, Joruus Sabaoth gets the edge as a force wielder. And now, the verdict. As I mentioned earlier, both teams utilize very similar tactical approaches. Both teams are composed of one dedicated lightsaber duelist who serves as merely an extension of a dedicated force wielder's will, the only real difference being their respective level of skill. While neither of them are highly experienced warriors, Padawan Aayla Secura and Luuke Skywalker were capable lightsaber duelists in their own rights. And although outclassed in various degrees by their prospective adversaries, neither of them were by any means pushovers. Both employed fighting styles designed to quickly overwhelm the opposition, as well as ensure their master's safety. What truly decides this match is the level of skill in which they employed this tactic, and it is in this regard Aayla falls short. Due to her inexperience, her technique was very rudimentary, employing the basic tenets of Forms 4 and 5, and little more than that. Meaning Luuke doesn't have much to worry about in regards to Aayla suddenly and drastically altering her technique, the one thing that is proven to be Luuke's undoing. Another factor that must be addressed is the caliber of the opponents they faced. Bear in mind that Luke Skywalker was forced to drastically alter his fighting style in order to combat his clone, as his typical level of skill wasn't enough to overcome him in a straight lightsaber duel. By contrast, Aayla did not have the skills necessary to defeat her master, her survival in that contest owing entirely to Voss's apprehension rather than any skill on her part. And I think we could all agree that Luke Skywalker easily outclassed Quinlan Voss in their respective time frames. As combative force wielders, Volfe Karkko and Joruus Sabaoth also shared similar abilities and tactical sensibilities, utilizing a wide array of powerful force abilities to power through the opposition, as well as relying on unorthodox techniques to off-balance and confuse. However, Sabaoth's raw combative power is slightly above Karkko's own, and his battle meditation is the perfect weapon to use against Karkko's illusions. Volfe's chief failing is his inability to rally from unexpected setbacks, believing that his strength in the Force and Sith illusions are capable of carrying him through any situation. Simply put, he relies too heavily on a specific skill set, because it's never failed him before, and his slowness to adapt would provide Sabaoth with the opening he needs. As for how this battle would play out, I would say the circumstances would proceed as such. The four of them would meet on neutral ground, the battle beginning with Volfe commanding Aayla to attack, with C'baoth doing the same to Luuke. The two Thralls would engage in a lightsaber duel while their masters watch, both of them interested in how the contest will play out. After a brief engagement, Luuke would hone in on Ayla's faltering defense and slash her through the stomach, killing her. Luuke would then immediately be blasted and killed by an enraged Karkko, leaving the two masters alone. Similarly enraged by the loss of his minion, C'baoth would attack Volfe, and the two would engage in a forced duel, or a wizard's duel as Jen Sarai would put it. If you'll permit me a comparison to alternative media, I feel the forced battle between these two would play out like the wizard's duel between Gandalf the Grey and Saruman the White in the film adaptation of Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, with Volfe Karkko standing in for Gandalf and Joruus C'baoth standing in for Saruman. They would blast and push each other with telekinesis and lightning, both sides taking roughly equal amounts of damage. Realizing the fight could go on indefinitely, Volfe would attempt to use his Sith illusions to distract C'baoth and expose an opening. However, this would be met with C'baoth using his battle meditation to dispel Karkko's illusions, rendering them harmless. As Volfe is temporarily rendered defenseless by the sudden and unexpected maneuver, C'baoth would seize the opportunity and overwhelm Volfe, thrashing him with telekinesis or lightning, then delivering a brutal killing blow, ending the Dark Jedi's life. And thus, I declare Joruus C'baoth, the battered but resolved victor. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this installment of the Versus series. I realize this battle was a bit of a departure from the typical format, so I hope you guys found it satisfactory. As always, you are free to leave suggestions for future battles in the comment section below. Thanks again to Jen Sarai for requesting this matchup, and I'll see you guys later.